Apologize to her. Right now. Emily Carter's voice cut through the marble lobby so sharply that every conversation around her stopped. Richard Coleman slowly turned, disbelief crossing his face as though no employee had ever spoken to him that way. Between them stood Gloria Harris, a 58-year-old black cleaner, gripping the handle of her supply cart, her face burning with humiliation. A few drops of spilled coffee stained the polished floor near her shoes. "Excuse me?" Richard asked. Emily stepped closer. "You heard me. You blamed her without asking what happened, embarrassed her in front of everyone, and ordered her out of the building. Apologize." Richard glanced around at the employees, pretending not to watch. "This is none of your concern. You made it everyone's concern when you decided to humiliate her in public." Gloria quietly touched Emily's arm. "Miss Carter, please. I cannot lose this job." Those words changed something in Emily's expression. She looked at Gloria, then back at Richard. She should not have to beg for her job because you refused to ask one question. Richard's jaw tightened. "You are risking your career over a cleaner." Emily held his gaze. "No. You are risking yours over how you treat one." A stunned silence followed. Near the rear of the crowd stood a tall black man in a plain maintenance uniform, holding a toolbox at his side. Nobody looked twice at him. Nobody recognized Marcus Bennett, the Billionaire chief executive officer who owned the company, occupying all 52 floors above them. And Marcus said nothing. He had arrived that morning for one reason: to discover what his company looked like when people believed nobody powerful was watching. Now he was getting his answer. Richard pointed toward the coffee on the floor. "She created a mess minutes before our most important clients arrived." "I did not spill it," Gloria said softly. Richard barely looked at her. "Then who did?" Gloria hesitated. Across the lobby, a young assistant lowered his eyes. Emily noticed. Marcus noticed too. Richard did not. "That is what I thought," Richard said. Emily stepped between him and Gloria's cart. "No, that is what you decided." Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Walk away, Emily. Not until you speak to her like a human being." The employees surrounding them remained frozen. Marcus studied every face. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked afraid. Not one stepped forward. Only Emily. Richard gave a cold smile. "You have no idea what you are doing to your future." Emily's face remained steady, though her hands had begun trembling slightly at her sides. She knew exactly how much influence Richard carried. He controlled promotions, performance reviews, and executive recommendations. Standing against him could cost her everything she had spent 8 years building. Still, she did not move. "If my future depends on pretending this is acceptable," she said, "then maybe I have been working toward the wrong future." Richard stared at her. Gloria looked close to tears. And behind them, the unknown maintenance worker quietly reached into his pocket and turned off the temporary employee badge scanner he had been testing. Marcus had seen enough to know this moment was no misunderstanding. But he had not yet seen enough to know how far Richard would go. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. Richard suddenly pointed toward the executive elevators. "My office. 10 minutes, Emily." Then he looked at Gloria. "And you should start wondering whether you still work here tomorrow." Marcus watched him walk away. Emily believed she had just challenged one of the most powerful men in the building with nobody important on her side. She had no idea the quiet maintenance worker standing 20 feet away had the authority to change everything. 12 hours earlier, Marcus Bennett had entered Whitmore Plaza through a side service entrance carrying a metal toolbox and wearing a Navy maintenance uniform with a temporary identification badge clipped to his chest. It was the first time in nearly 6 years that he had walked into one of his own buildings without an executive assistant, security escort, or senior manager waiting to greet him. That was exactly the point. The decision had begun with an anonymous letter delivered directly to his private office 3 days earlier. The message contained no demands and named no specific victim. It simply described 2 versions of the same company. One existed when executives were watching, filled with polished smiles, respectful language, and carefully prepared reports. The other appeared after senior leadership left the room. In that company, contractors were treated as disposable, junior employees were afraid to speak, and certain managers used authority as permission to humiliate anyone beneath them. Marcus had read the letter twice before calling his longtime advisor, Daniel Brooks. "I want to see it myself," Marcus had said. Daniel initially objected. A billionaire chief executive officer walking around headquarters disguised as temporary maintenance staff created security concerns, legal complications, and countless opportunities for misunderstanding. Marcus listened, then asked one question. "If everyone knows I am coming, what exactly am I going to learn?" By 7 that morning, only Daniel and the head of corporate security knew Marcus was inside the building. His temporary credentials were legitimate, and his assignment gave him reasonable access to public office areas without attracting attention. Marcus expected the experience to feel artificial. Instead, within 30 minutes, he noticed how quickly people stopped seeing him. Executives walked past without making eye contact. One manager handed him an empty coffee cup as though he were responsible for disposing of it. Another employee apologized when their shoulders nearly touched, then relaxed the moment she noticed his uniform. Marcus said little. He watched. At 8:15, he deliberately stopped near a directory on the 17th floor and pretended he could not locate a conference room. 3 employees passed him before Emily Carter stopped. She carried a laptop under one arm and looked as though she was already late. "Are you looking for something?" she asked. "Conference room, 17C. Emily pointed down the corridor, then paused. "Actually, that hallway is confusing. I am going that direction." She walked with him nearly 60 feet before showing him the correct door. "First day? Is it that obvious?" Marcus asked. Emily smiled. "Only because you still look surprised by the elevators." She wished him luck and continued toward her meeting without asking his position or waiting for gratitude. 20 minutes later, Marcus saw her again near the employee cafe. Gloria was replacing a heavy trash liner when Emily stopped to help move a chair blocking the cart. "Thank you for fixing the conference room yesterday," Emily told her. Gloria smiled. "Nobody even noticed." "I noticed." For simple words. Marcus remembered them. Then Richard Coleman entered the cafe, and the atmosphere changed immediately. Conversations became quieter. Employees straightened in their seats. Richard greeted 2 senior directors warmly before walking past Gloria without acknowledging her. When Marcus accidentally stood near the executive coffee station, Richard looked at his maintenance uniform and said, "That area is for staff." Marcus almost smiled at the irony. "I thought I was staff." Richard did not find it amusing. "You know what I mean." Then he walked away. Marcus watched him go, understanding that the anonymous letter might have been more accurate than he wanted to believe. By the time coffee spilled across the marble lobby hours later, Marcus had already seen enough small moments to recognize a pattern. What he had not expected was Emily. She had no idea who he was, no reason to impress him, and nothing obvious to gain from defending Gloria. Yet when everyone else stepped back, she stepped forward. And as Marcus watched her prepare to enter Richard's office alone, he realized the real test of his company had only just begun. Emily waited until the elevator doors closed before allowing herself to breathe. Richard's office was on the 48th floor, 12 levels above her own department, and far enough from the lobby for the silence to feel deliberate. She stood beside a senior vice president who never looked away from his phone and wondered how many people downstairs were already discussing what she had done. By the time the elevator opened, she had made one decision. She would not apologize for defending Gloria. Richard was waiting behind his desk when Emily entered. He did not invite her to sit. "Close the door." Emily left it open. "I would prefer it this way." Richard looked toward the hallway. "You embarrassed me in front of my employees." Gloria is one of those employees. She is employed by a contractor. She works in this building every day. Richard leaned back. "This is exactly your problem, Emily. You confuse compassion with leadership, and you confuse authority with being right." His expression hardened. "Be careful." Emily felt the warning, but she refused to let it control her voice. "Did you ask who spilled the coffee? I saw her cleaning it. That is her job. Cleaning a mess does not mean she caused it." Richard stood and walked toward the window. "Our clients were arriving. I needed the problem handled." The floor was handled. Gloria was the person you decided to punish. Richard turned. "Why do you care so much?" Emily stared at him. "Because she is a person." Downstairs, Marcus remained near the lobby while Gloria carefully cleaned the last traces of coffee from the marble. Most employees had returned to work, but the tension remained. Marcus approached slowly. "Are you all right?" Gloria looked up at his maintenance uniform and gave a tired smile. I have been better. Did you spill it? She hesitated. No. Then why did you not say who did? Gloria glanced toward the security cameras. Because the young man who dropped it works directly for Mr. Coleman. He has a family too. Maybe he was scared. Marcus studied her. Even after being humiliated, Gloria was protecting someone else. Has Mr. Coleman treated you like that before? Her hand stopped moving. You are new here. That obvious? Gloria almost smiled. People who have been here longer know which questions not to ask. Marcus lowered his voice. Maybe somebody should start asking them. Gloria looked directly at him. People like us do not get to ask without consequences. The word stayed with Marcus. He had built the company from a small regional firm into a multi-billion-dollar organization. Yet a woman working inside his headquarters believed the company had no place for her voice. Before Marcus could respond, the young assistant from earlier approached them. His name badge read Tyler Grant. He looked pale. Miss Harris, he said quietly, I am sorry. Gloria immediately understood. Tyler glanced toward the elevators. I should have said something. I spilled the coffee when I was carrying the client materials. Marcus watched Gloria. Then tell the truth. Tyler swallowed. Mr. Coleman recommended me for this job. If I embarrass him, I could lose everything. Marcus said nothing for a moment. Fear was moving through the building like an invisible chain, connecting people at every level. Upstairs, Richard placed a document in front of Emily. This is a formal warning for insubordination. Emily looked at the page but did not touch it. I will not sign something that says defending an employee was misconduct. Then human resources will note your refusal. Let them. Richard's eyes narrowed. You think being morally superior protects your career? Emily stood. No. I think staying silent would make me ashamed of it. She turned toward the open door. Richard's voice followed her. This is your last chance to walk this back. Emily stopped, but did not turn around. Then you already have my answer. Minutes later, she stepped into the elevator, unaware that downstairs, Tyler had finally made a decision of his own. He walked directly toward Marcus and whispered, I need to tell someone what really happened. Tyler glanced over his shoulder before speaking, as if the marble walls themselves might report him. I spilled the coffee, he said. Marcus kept his expression neutral. Then why did Gloria take the blame? Tyler looked down. She did not take it. Mr. Coleman decided it was her before anyone explained anything. And you stayed quiet. The words were not cruel, but Tyler felt their weight. I was carrying folders and 2 coffees when my phone rang. I turned too fast and dropped one. Gloria came over with her cart before I could find paper towels. Then Mr. Coleman walked in. Marcus nodded slowly. So tell him. Tyler gave a nervous laugh. You really are new here. Marcus had heard those words twice that day. What does that mean? Mr. Coleman brought me into this company. He controls my performance reviews. He knows every senior executive who matters. Tyler lowered his voice. People do not challenge him and move up. Marcus looked across the lobby toward the executive elevators. Maybe the people who matter are not the people you think. Tyler did not understand, but the sentence followed him as he walked away. A few minutes later, Emily stepped out of the elevator holding the unsigned disciplinary notice. Gloria immediately approached her. Miss Carter, I am sorry. Emily shook her head. You have nothing to apologize for. You could lose your job because of me. No. If anything happens to my job, it will be because of a decision I made. Gloria looked toward the paper in Emily's hand. What decision? Emily folded it once. Not to pretend he was right. Marcus watched from 20 feet away. There was no audience now, no crowd to impress, and Emily still spoke with the same conviction. That mattered. Before he could move closer, Richard appeared from another elevator with 2 senior directors beside him. His expression changed the moment he saw Emily talking to Gloria. I thought I made myself clear. Emily turned. You did. Then why are you still discussing a confidential management matter in the lobby? I am telling Gloria she did nothing wrong. Richard looked at Gloria. Return to work. Gloria lowered her eyes and reached for her cart. Emily did not stop her, but Richard was not finished. His attention shifted toward Marcus. And why are you standing around? Marcus glanced at the toolbox beside his feet. I was assigned to inspect the badge scanner. Then inspect it. Richard turned to leave. Marcus spoke calmly. Sir, I saw what happened with the coffee. Richard stopped. Tyler, now standing near the reception desk, went completely still. Emily looked at Marcus with surprise. Did you? Richard asked. Yes. Then you saw Miss Harris create a disruption before our clients arrived. I saw her cleaning one. The two senior directors exchanged uncomfortable looks. Richard's face tightened. What is your name? Marcus. Marcus what? Bennett. Richard showed no recognition. In a company with thousands of employees and a chief executive officer rarely seen outside formal events, the plain uniform was apparently more powerful than the name. Well, Marcus Bennett. Maintenance personnel are not responsible for evaluating executive decisions. Marcus met his eyes. I thought facts were everyone's responsibility. Emily almost smiled. Richard did not. Who is your supervisor? That depends on the day. Richard stepped closer, studying him. You think this is funny? Not at all. Marcus remained perfectly calm. I think a woman was blamed for something she did not do. Another employee was disciplined for questioning it, and everyone who knows the truth seems afraid to speak. The lobby fell silent again. Richard looked around and noticed Tyler. Do you know something about this? Tyler's face lost color. For several seconds, fear held him in place. Then he looked at Gloria, at Emily, and finally at the maintenance worker who had somehow found the courage to say what everyone else avoided. Tyler took one step forward. Yes, sir, he said. I spilled the coffee. Richard stared at him. Gloria closed her eyes with relief. Emily looked toward Marcus, wondering why a temporary maintenance worker seemed completely unafraid. Richard, however, was already calculating. My office, he told Tyler. Then his eyes returned to Marcus. You too. Marcus quietly picked up his toolbox. He had entered the building hoping to understand its culture from the bottom. Now the man responsible for poisoning that culture was personally inviting the owner of the company into his office, still believing he was someone who could be intimidated. The elevator ride to the 48th floor lasted less than a minute, but Tyler looked as though every second carried another consequence. Richard stood near the doors with his arms folded, saying nothing. Marcus remained beside the control panel, his toolbox resting calmly at his feet. When the doors opened, Richard led them into his office and closed the door. Sit down, Tyler. Tyler obeyed. Marcus remained standing. Richard looked at him. You can sit too. I am comfortable. Richard studied him for a moment, then turned toward Tyler. Tell me exactly what happened. Tyler swallowed. I was carrying the client folders and 2 cups of coffee. My phone rang. I turned too quickly and dropped one. And Gloria? She came over to clean it. Richard walked behind his desk. Why did you not say this downstairs? Tyler hesitated. I was afraid. Of what? Tyler looked at Marcus before answering. Of disappointing you. Richard leaned back, apparently satisfied by the explanation. Good. Then we understand each other. You made a mistake under pressure. That does not need to become a larger issue. Tyler blinked. But Gloria was blamed. And the situation is over. It is not over for her, Marcus said. Richard slowly turned toward him. I did not ask you. Marcus held his gaze. You asked what happened. Now you know. Richard's patience disappeared. What I know is that you are a temporary maintenance employee who has involved himself in matters far beyond his responsibilities. Marcus almost admired how naturally the words came. Richard had not asked about his experience, his position, or why he was present. The uniform had already answered every question for him. Does responsibility depend on job title? Marcus asked. Inside a corporation, responsibility follows authority. And accountability? Richard stared at him. Tyler shifted nervously in his chair. You seem unusually interested in philosophy for someone carrying a toolbox. Marcus glanced down at it. People reveal a lot when they think the person carrying the toolbox cannot affect them. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in Richard's expression. It lasted only a second. Who hired you? The company. Which contractor? My assignment came through corporate operations. Richard reached for his desk phone. Then corporate operations can explain why you are disrupting my department. Marcus did not stop him. Richard called an internal number and requested information about a temporary maintenance employee named Marcus Bennett. The person on the other end apparently found nothing immediately useful. Richard ended the call with visible irritation. Until I clarify your status, stay away from executive areas. Of course. Marcus picked up his toolbox. Tyler stood as well, but Richard raised a hand. Not you. Marcus paused at the door. Tyler told the truth. I am aware. Then Gloria deserves the same truth. Richard's voice became cold. This conversation is finished. Marcus opened the door. For you, perhaps. He stepped into the hallway, and found Emily waiting near the elevators. She looked at him with concern. Are you still employed? Marcus smiled slightly. As far as I know. You should not have risked your job for us. You did. Emily looked toward Richard's closed office. That was different. Why? She thought about it. Because I could not stand there and watch someone be treated as though her dignity mattered less because of her uniform. Marcus looked down at his own maintenance shirt. Emily immediately understood the irony and gave a tired smile. That came out wrong. No, Marcus said. I think it came out exactly right. The elevator arrived, but neither entered immediately. Marcus asked the question that had been on his mind since the lobby. If nobody had supported you downstairs, would you still have defended Gloria? Emily looked genuinely confused. Nobody did support me. The answer struck Marcus harder than she realized. The elevator doors opened again. As Emily stepped inside, Marcus's phone vibrated in his pocket. A private message from Daniel Brooks contained only one sentence. We found 7 previous complaints involving Richard Coleman, and 5 were closed without investigation. Marcus read it twice. Then he looked toward Richard's office. The spilled coffee was no longer the real problem. It had simply uncovered one. Marcus did not return to the lobby immediately. He stepped into an empty conference room on the 47th floor, closed the door, and called Daniel Brooks from his private phone. 7 complaints? Marcus asked. 7 that we found quickly, Daniel replied. There may be more. 3 involved contractors, 2 involved junior employees, and 2 came from former department managers. 5 were closed without formal interviews. Marcus looked through the glass wall toward employees moving quietly between offices. Who closed them? Human Resources records showed different names, but Richard was copied on several internal communications. Marcus's expression hardened. Do not contact him yet. Preserve everything. Emails, security footage, complaint records, performance reviews, all of it. Understood. And Daniel, nobody gets punished because they speak to us. After ending the call, Marcus returned downstairs. The lobby had regained its polished appearance, as though nothing had happened. Gloria was replacing supplies near a service corridor when Marcus approached. Can I ask you something? She gave him a cautious look. You ask a lot of questions for a maintenance man. I have been told that. Gloria smiled faintly, then became serious. Marcus lowered his voice. Has anyone ever filed a complaint about Mr. Coleman? Her expression changed immediately. Why? Because what happened today did not feel like the first time. Gloria looked toward the hallway before answering. A cleaner named Denise complained last year. Her schedule disappeared 2 weeks later. Disappeared? The contractor said there were no more hours for her. Was Richard responsible? Nobody could prove it. Gloria adjusted a stack of folded cloths. That is how things work around here. Nothing happens directly. People just stop getting shifts, stop getting promoted, or suddenly receive bad reviews. Marcus felt a quiet anger building beneath his calm exterior. Systems did not become cruel in one dramatic moment. They became cruel when fear was repeated until everyone accepted it as normal. Why have you stayed? He asked. Gloria looked at him as though the answer should have been obvious. Health insurance. Rent. My granddaughter starts community college next fall. People with bills do not always get to make brave choices. Marcus nodded. Maybe they should not have to choose between dignity and survival. Gloria studied him carefully. Who are you, really? For 1 second, Marcus considered telling her. Then footsteps approached. Emily appeared from the corridor, still carrying the unsigned disciplinary notice. Richard scheduled a meeting with Human Resources tomorrow morning, she said. Gloria's face fell. Because of me. Because of him. Emily corrected gently. Marcus looked at the document. What happens if you refuse to sign? It goes into my file anyway. And then, Emily shrugged, but the movement could not hide her concern. Then Richard decides how difficult he wants my career to become. Marcus wanted to end the uncertainty immediately. One phone call could cancel the meeting, suspend Richard, and reveal everything. But 7 complaints had already shown him the danger of acting before understanding the full system that allowed Richard to operate. Removing one executive without exposing the people and procedures protecting him would only hide the problem again. Go to the meeting, Marcus said. Emily looked at him. That is surprisingly confident advice from someone who may not survive his own first day. Maybe I am optimistic. Gloria laughed softly for the first time that afternoon. Emily smiled too, but her expression faded when Richard appeared across the lobby. He was speaking quietly with a human resources director Marcus recognized as Susan Blake. Richard pointed toward Emily, then toward Marcus. Susan followed his gesture and nodded. Marcus watched the exchange carefully. A moment later, his phone vibrated with another message from Daniel. This time the words were worse. Susan Blake personally closed 3 of the 7 complaints. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. Richard was not operating alone. And tomorrow morning, Emily was walking directly into a meeting controlled by 2 people who already knew how to make complaints disappear. The next morning, Emily arrived at Whitmore Plaza 20 minutes early, but Richard and Susan Blake were already waiting for her in a conference room on the 48th floor. A printed disciplinary report rested in the center of the table. Susan gestured toward an empty chair. "Please sit, Emily." Emily remained standing long enough to read the first line upside down. Insubordination and inappropriate interference with executive operations. She sat slowly. "Is Gloria here?" Richard answered before Susan could. "This meeting is about your conduct, not hers." "My conduct began when you blamed her for something she did not do." Susan folded her hands. "Tyler's statement has clarified the incident. However, the concern is the manner in which you challenged senior leadership in a public area." Emily stared at her. "So the accusation was wrong, but my objection was the problem? That is not what I said. It is exactly what this document says." Richard leaned forward. "You were given an opportunity yesterday to resolve this professionally. You refused." Susan turned the report toward Emily. "We are prepared to reduce this to a written coaching notice if you acknowledge that your public confrontation was inappropriate." Emily understood the offer immediately. Sign the paper, protect her position, and allow everyone involved to describe the incident as a misunderstanding. "And Gloria?" she asked. Susan paused. "Her contractor will manage any employment concerns." Emily's eyes narrowed. "What employment concerns?" Richard looked toward Susan, and that brief glance answered more than either of them intended. "You are planning to remove her from the building." "No decision has been finalized," Susan said. Emily pushed the document away. "Then I am not signing this." Richard exhaled slowly. "You are making an emotional decision." "No, I am making a very clear one." 2 floors below, Marcus stood inside a secured operations room with Daniel Brooks, who had entered the building before sunrise. On the monitors before them were archived complaint records, internal emails, and security footage preserved from deletion. "We found 11 complaints now," Daniel said. 4 more were filed through the contractor system and never transferred to corporate human resources. Marcus read one email twice. Richard had written that a former cleaner was becoming difficult after she questioned scheduling practices. 2 weeks later, her building access had been removed. Another message described a junior employee as not leadership material after he reported being publicly humiliated. Marcus looked at Daniel. How many people knew? Enough that this cannot be explained as one bad manager. Marcus's phone rang. It was Tyler. His voice was quiet. "Mr. Coleman asked me to change my written statement." Marcus became still. "What exactly did he ask you to change?" "He wants me to say Gloria distracted me before I dropped the coffee and that Emily made the situation worse." "Did Gloria distract you?" "No." "Then write exactly what happened. Nothing more." Tyler hesitated. "Why should I trust you?" Marcus looked through the glass toward the city below. "You should not trust me because I tell you to. Trust the truth because it does not change depending on who is in the room." Upstairs, Emily stood to leave. Susan stopped her. "If you walk out without signing, this may affect your future with the company." Emily placed both hands on the table and looked directly at Richard. "Then put one more sentence in my file. I defended a woman who was blamed for something she did not do, and I would do it again." She turned and opened the door. Marcus was standing in the hallway in his maintenance uniform. Emily froze. "What are you doing up here?" "Working," he said. Richard appeared behind her. His face changed immediately. "You were told to stay away from executive areas." Marcus looked past him at Susan, then back at Richard. "And Tyler was told to change his statement." The color drained from Richard's face. Emily stared at Marcus. Susan slowly rose from her chair. For the first time since the entire ordeal began, Richard looked less angry than afraid. "Who exactly are you?" he asked. Marcus held his gaze for a long moment, then answered calmly. "Someone you should have treated exactly the same before you needed to know." Richard stared at Marcus, searching his face for an explanation that would restore the balance of power he understood. None came. Susan Blake stepped into the hallway and lowered her voice. Mr. Bennett, whatever Tyler told you is a confidential human resources matter. Marcus glanced at her. Interesting. Yesterday, I was too unimportant to have an opinion. Today, I am important enough to be warned about confidentiality. Emily looked between them, sensing something beneath the conversation she could not yet identify. Richard recovered first. This has gone far enough. Security can escort him downstairs. For telling the truth? Emily asked. Richard turned sharply toward her. Your meeting is over. Then so is my silence. Emily held up the unsigned report. You admitted Gloria did not spill the coffee, yet you are still threatening her position. Tyler told the truth, and now someone is asking him to rewrite it. What exactly are you trying to protect? Susan's expression tightened. Nobody is threatening anyone. Marcus reached into his pocket and checked his phone. Daniel had sent another message. Tyler's original written statement had been preserved. Marcus slipped the phone away. Then there should be no problem keeping Tyler's first statement exactly as he submitted it. Richard looked at him. You have no authority to make that decision. Marcus nodded once. That is what you believe. Emily studied him more carefully now. His calmness no longer seemed like recklessness. It seemed like certainty. The elevator opened at the end of the hallway, and Daniel Brooks stepped out wearing a dark business suit. Richard recognized him immediately. As chief legal officer for Bennett Global Holdings, Daniel rarely visited the building without advance notice. Susan straightened. Mr. Brooks, we were not expecting you. Daniel walked past Richard and stopped beside Marcus. Everything you requested has been secured. The hallway became completely silent. Emily's eyes widened. Richard looked from Daniel to Marcus. Requested? Marcus did not answer. Not yet. Instead, he turned to Emily. You should go back to your department. Emily frowned. I am not leaving Gloria alone in this. You are not abandoning her. His voice was quiet but firm. I promise. Emily hesitated. You still have not told me who you are. I know. And you expect me to trust you? Marcus almost smiled. No. I expect you to keep doing what you were doing before you knew whether I mattered. Emily held his gaze, then stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Daniel hand Marcus a secure tablet. Richard immediately moved closer. Whatever this is, I can explain. Marcus looked down at the screen. 11 complaints. Missing interviews. Altered summaries. Contractor access records. Patterns that stretched back almost 3 years. I have not accused you of anything, Marcus said. Richard forced a smile. Good. Because this entire situation has been exaggerated by an employee with poor judgment and a cleaner who misunderstood a routine management decision. Marcus looked up slowly. Her name is Gloria? Richard said nothing. You have worked in the same building with her for 4 years, Marcus continued. Did you know her name before yesterday? The question landed harder than any accusation. Susan tried to interrupt. We need to handle this through proper channels. Daniel answered calmly. We are. Richard's confidence began to fracture. Who authorized this review? Marcus looked toward Daniel. Daniel did not speak. He simply waited. Marcus then removed the temporary identification badge from his uniform and placed it on the conference table. I did. Richard stared at the badge, then at Marcus. Recognition was finally beginning to form, but disbelief fought against it. Before he could speak, Marcus continued. At 3 this afternoon, there will be a formal meeting with independent counsel, corporate compliance, and the board's ethics committee. Until then, no employee, contractor, witness, or record connected to this matter is to be contacted, disciplined, transferred, or altered. Susan's face went pale. Richard whispered, You cannot issue that order. Daniel finally looked directly at him. Yes, he can. Marcus picked up his toolbox one last time. The full truth was still hours away from being revealed to everyone else, but for Richard Coleman, the disguise had already begun to disappear. At 2:45 that afternoon, Emily received a calendar invitation marked mandatory and confidential. The location was the executive boardroom on the 50th floor. Gloria received a separate request to attend, along with Tyler. Neither message explained why. When Emily reached the lobby, she found Gloria waiting beside the elevators, still wearing her cleaning uniform. Do you know what this is about? Gloria asked. No, Emily said, although she suspected the maintenance worker had something to do with it. But whatever happens, you are not walking into that room alone. Gloria gave her a grateful look. Tyler joined them seconds later, visibly nervous. The three rode upward in silence. When the boardroom doors opened, Richard was already seated beside Susan Blake. Two independent attorneys, three members of the ethics committee, and Daniel Brooks occupied the opposite side of the long table. Marcus was nowhere in sight. Emily felt disappointment she could not explain. She had believed his strange confidence meant something. Richard looked uncomfortable, but still composed. "I assume we can begin," he said. Daniel glanced at the clock. "We are waiting for one person." At exactly 3 o'clock, the doors opened. Marcus entered, but the maintenance uniform was gone. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, his posture unchanged, his expression calm. Everyone around the table immediately stood. Emily remained seated for half a second longer, unable to understand what she was seeing. Then she noticed the way Daniel addressed him. "Mr. Bennett." Gloria covered her mouth. Tyler stared at the man he had trusted with his confession. Richard looked as though the last 24 hours were rearranging themselves inside his mind. Marcus walked to the head of the table. "Please sit." Everyone obeyed. Emily slowly lowered herself into her chair. "You are Marcus Bennett," she whispered. Marcus looked at her. "Yes." "The Marcus Bennett?" Tyler asked before realizing how the question sounded. Marcus gave a small nod. "Chief Executive Officer and majority owner of Bennett Global Holdings." Gloria looked down at her hands. "And you were walking around with a toolbox. It helped people forget I was there." Marcus turned toward Richard. "Some people forgot I was a person." Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, if I had known you were conducting an internal review, I would have cooperated fully." Marcus's expression did not change. "That is precisely why you were not told." The room became silent. Marcus placed a folder on the table. This review did not begin with yesterday's incident. It began with an anonymous report about a culture of fear inside this building. What happened to Gloria confirmed that the concern required immediate investigation. Richard leaned forward. "I made a judgment based on what I saw. And when the facts proved your judgment wrong, did you apologize?" Richard said nothing. Marcus looked toward Susan. When Tyler corrected the record, why was Emily still facing discipline? Susan shifted in her chair. Her conduct was separate from the underlying incident. Was it? Marcus asked. Daniel opened another file. Independent counsel has preserved 11 complaints involving retaliation, intimidation, discriminatory treatment, or misuse of authority. Several were closed without complete interviews. For contractor complaints never reached corporate compliance. Gloria looked at Marcus in disbelief. Emily's eyes moved toward Richard. His confidence was disappearing. "These are allegations," Richard said. "Yes," Marcus replied. "Which is why there will be an investigation, not a public spectacle." He turned toward Gloria. "Miss Harris, you will not lose your assignment for telling the truth." Then he looked at Tyler. "Neither will you." Finally, his eyes settled on Emily. "And your disciplinary notice has been withdrawn, pending an independent review of how it was issued." Emily exhaled slowly. Richard tried once more. "Marcus, we have worked together for 9 years." Marcus held his gaze. "Then for 9 years, you knew exactly what this company claimed to stand for." He paused. "The question now is whether you believe those standards applied when you thought nobody powerful was watching." Nobody spoke. Richard had spent years measuring people by titles, offices, and influence. Now the man he had dismissed as maintenance sat at the head of the table, and the people he had treated as powerless were finally being heard. The meeting continued for nearly 2 hours, but Marcus refused to turn it into a courtroom. Every person was allowed to speak, and every statement was documented for the independent investigation. Richard remained seated at the far end of the table, increasingly quiet as the evidence expanded beyond one spilled cup of coffee. Tyler described being asked to revise his statement. Gloria explained how contractors learned to avoid complaints because losing access to the building could mean losing their income. Emily described the disciplinary warning and the pressure to apologize for challenging Richard publicly. Then Daniel presented records from former employees whose experiences followed the same pattern. Marcus listened without interruption. When the final statement had been recorded, one of the independent attorneys closed her folder. "Based on the evidence currently available, we recommend administrative leave for Mr. Coleman and Ms. Blake while the investigation continues." Richard immediately looked at Marcus. "You cannot seriously believe I should be removed because of accusations from disgruntled employees." Marcus remained calm. You are not being removed because someone complained. You are being placed on leave because the complaints were repeatedly buried. Witnesses describe retaliation, and there is evidence that a statement was nearly altered yesterday. Richard shook his head. After everything I have done for this company? That history will be considered, Marcus said. So will everything else. Susan looked toward Daniel. In my position, the same independent process applies to you, Marcus answered. No exceptions. Richard pushed his chair back. You walked around pretending to be maintenance and judged people without giving them a fair chance. Marcus looked directly at him. I watched how you behaved when you believed I had nothing you wanted. Richard had no response. Marcus continued. You were polite to executives. You welcomed important clients. You knew how respect worked. You simply decided who deserved it. The room became silent again. Richard stood, collected nothing from the table, and left with an attorney assigned to oversee the administrative process. Susan followed several minutes later. Only then did Gloria release the breath she seemed to have been holding all afternoon. Am I really safe to come back tomorrow? She asked. Marcus turned toward her. Yes. Your contractor has been formally notified that no employment action connected to your participation in this investigation will be permitted. Corporate compliance will monitor the process directly. Gloria nodded, but her eyes remained uncertain. That sounds good on paper. Marcus understood immediately. You have heard promises before. Yes, sir. Then do not trust the promise yet. Watch what we do next. Emily looked at him across the table. That answer seemed to matter to her more than any dramatic guarantee could have. Tyler quietly apologized to Gloria again. This time, Gloria accepted without protecting him from the truth. Next time, she told him, speak before somebody else has to stand alone. Tyler nodded. When everyone began leaving, Emily remained behind. Marcus removed his jacket and loosened his tie, suddenly looking more like the man she had met beside the broken badge scanner. You could have told me, she said. Would it have changed how you treated me? No, that is why I did not. Emily folded her arms. You let me walk into that meeting this morning thinking I could lose my career. Marcus's expression became serious. You are right. The answer surprised her. I believed staying undercover would help expose the larger problem. But that decision placed uncertainty on people who had already taken risks. I should have considered that more carefully. Emily studied him. She had expected power to defend itself. Instead, he accepted criticism without argument. So what happens now? She asked. Marcus looked through the windows at the city below. Now we find out whether this company can become what it keeps claiming to be. The next morning, every employee received notice of an independent workplace review, a protected reporting channel outside local management, and new safeguards for contractors. But Marcus knew policies alone could become another polished report. Real change would be measured somewhere else. Down in the lobby, Gloria arrived for work and stopped when a senior executive held the service elevator door for her. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant. Yet for the first time in years, she entered the building without lowering her eyes. 3 weeks later, the investigation reached conclusions that could no longer be dismissed as misunderstandings. Independent counsel confirmed a pattern of retaliation, selective enforcement, and improper interference with employee complaints. Richard Coleman was removed from his executive position, while Susan Blake left Human Resources after the review found repeated failures to follow required procedures. Marcus refused to celebrate either outcome. Removing 2 people did not erase the silence that had protected the problem for years. On Monday morning, he stood before hundreds of employees in the company auditorium without a maintenance uniform, a toolbox, or any attempt to hide who he was. Gloria sat near the aisle beside Tyler. Emily stood quietly near the back. A company does not become ethical because its values are printed on a wall, Marcus said. It becomes ethical when the person with the least authority can tell the truth without fearing what happens next. Nobody moved. We failed that standard. The word we surprised people. Marcus could have blamed Richard and Susan alone. Instead, he continued. Leadership allowed systems to exist that made silence safer than honesty. I am responsible for correcting that. He announced permanent independent reporting channels, mandatory reviews of contractor complaints, protections against retaliation, and direct audits of departments with unusually high turnover. Contractors would also receive access to the same workplace conduct protections as direct employees while working inside company facilities. When the meeting ended, employees gathered in small groups, speaking more openly than Marcus had heard during his undercover day. Yet the moment that mattered most happened quietly near the lobby. Gloria was organizing supplies when Marcus approached her. "How is your granddaughter?" he asked. Gloria blinked. "You remembered? You said she starts community college next fall." A smile appeared on her face. "She was accepted last week." "Congratulations." Gloria studied him for a moment. "You know, you look different without that toolbox." Marcus smiled. "People listen to me more. That is not always a good thing." He laughed softly. "I am beginning to understand that." Across the lobby, Emily watched the exchange before turning toward the elevators. Marcus caught up with her. "Do you have a minute?" "Does the chief executive officer need something?" she asked. "Marcus does." Emily stopped. "That depends. We are creating an employee culture council with authority to review workplace practices before they become crises. I want you to lead it." Emily's expression immediately changed. "Because I defended Gloria?" "No." Marcus shook his head. "One good decision should not automatically qualify someone for leadership. I reviewed your 8 years here. Your teams have strong retention, your performance record is excellent, and several employees credited you with helping them advance." Emily remained cautious. "Then why now?" "Because your record shows competence. What happened in the lobby showed character." She looked toward Gloria. "I do not want a reward for doing what anyone should have done." "Good," Marcus said. "I do not want someone who sees it as a reward. I want someone willing to challenge the system when the system is wrong." Emily considered the offer. "Would I be allowed to challenge you?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "Especially me." For the first time, she smiled without uncertainty. "Then I will consider it." "That is not a yes." "You are learning quickly." As Emily entered the elevator, Marcus remained in the lobby. A maintenance worker passed him carrying a ladder, and Marcus moved aside before greeting him by name. The man looked surprised. Marcus understood why. Change would not be proven by one investigation, one speech, or one promotion. It would be proven in thousands of ordinary moments when nobody believed those moments mattered. And this time, Marcus intended to make sure they did. 2 months later, Emily stood at the head of a conference table on the 36th floor, listening as a group of employees, contractors, and department leaders discussed problems that once would have remained buried. She had accepted Marcus's offer after negotiating one condition. The new Culture Council would not exist merely to make leadership look responsive. It needed direct access to compliance records, authority to recommend policy changes, and protection for anyone who spoke before the council. Marcus agreed to every condition. Now the results were beginning to show. Contractor complaints were reviewed within defined deadlines. Managers could no longer quietly remove workers from buildings without documented reasons. Employee surveys were handled by an independent team. None of it was perfect, but people were beginning to believe that speaking carried less risk than silence. Gloria noticed the difference before anyone showed her a report. Employees who once walked past her now greeted her by name. Some changes felt awkward at first, as though people were suddenly trying too hard, but others felt genuine. One afternoon, Gloria found Tyler waiting beside her supply cart with an envelope. "My first tuition contribution," he said. Gloria frowned. "For what?" "Your granddaughter." She immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not." Tyler smiled. "I thought you would say that." He opened the envelope and showed her a receipt instead. He had donated the money to a scholarship fund for children and grandchildren of contracted workers. Gloria stared at him for several seconds. "You finally learned how to do something good without making it about yourself." Tyler laughed. "I had a good teacher." Across the building, Marcus was learning his own lessons. During his undercover day, he had believed the greatest discovery would be identifying bad leadership. Instead, he had discovered how easily distance could hide reality from the person at the top. He began spending several hours each month visiting company locations without executive presentations or carefully arranged tours. He no longer disguised himself, but he asked to meet people whose names rarely appeared in board reports. One evening, he found Emily alone in the lobby reviewing notes after a council meeting. "You are still here," he said. "So are you." Marcus looked around the nearly empty space. "This place feels different." Emily closed her folder. "Some of it is different. Some people are just behaving better because they know you are paying attention. Is that progress?" "It is a beginning." Marcus smiled. "You never make this easy." You did not hire me to make it easy. They walked toward the elevators together. Near the service corridor, Gloria was preparing to leave for the night. Marcus held the door as she approached. My granddaughter starts classes Monday, she said proudly. Nursing program. Emily smiled. That is wonderful. Gloria looked at both of them. You know what is strange? That day with the coffee felt like the worst thing that could happen. Now I think maybe it forced everyone to see what was already here. Marcus nodded. Including me. Gloria stepped into the elevator. Especially you, Mr. Chief Executive Officer. The doors closed on her laughter. Emily looked at Marcus. She is not afraid of you anymore. Was she ever? Everyone was afraid of someone in this building. The word stayed with him. As they crossed the quiet lobby, Marcus stopped near the exact place where Gloria had once stood, surrounded by people who refused to speak. I keep thinking about what you did that day, he said. Emily looked at him. I defended someone. You did more than that. You acted without knowing whether anyone powerful would support you. Emily shook her head. That should not be extraordinary. No, Marcus said. But sometimes the things that should be ordinary are the clearest measure of who we are. Outside the glass doors, evening settled over the city. Employees left in small groups, executives and contractors passing through the same entrance. Marcus watched them for a moment before walking forward beside Emily, knowing the company had not been transformed by discovering who held the most power. It had begun changing when one person decided that someone with no power deserved the same dignity as everyone else. 6 months later, the marble lobby where everything had begun no longer felt like a place divided by invisible lines. Executives still hurried toward meetings, contractors still moved equipment through service corridors, and cleaners still worked before most employees arrived. But something fundamental had changed. People knew there were consequences for abusing authority, and more importantly, they knew there was protection for telling the truth. Gloria walked through the lobby carrying no cleaning supplies that morning. She wore a navy dress and held a small bouquet of flowers because her granddaughter was being recognized at a community scholarship ceremony sponsored by the company. Marcus had invited Gloria to speak, but she refused. This is her day, she had told him. I spent enough years watching powerful people make everything about themselves. I am not starting now. Marcus had laughed and accepted the lesson. Near the elevators, Emily was speaking with 2 new members of the Culture Council when Gloria approached. Look at you, Emily said warmly. You clean up pretty well yourself, Gloria replied, and both women laughed. Marcus arrived moments later without an entourage. He greeted Gloria first, then Emily. Ready, he asked. For the ceremony? Emily said. For Gloria to tell us everything we organized incorrectly. Gloria raised an eyebrow. You finally understand how this relationship works. They stepped outside together, but Marcus paused near the place where the spilled coffee had once stained the floor. Emily noticed. Still thinking about that day? Sometimes. Marcus looked across the lobby. I came here expecting to discover who was failing the company. I did not expect to discover how much the company had failed people I never heard from. Emily nodded. That is the problem with being at the top. Everyone tells you what they think you want to hear. Except you. You specifically hired me not to. Marcus smiled. I remember. Emily's expression softened. Do you know what I remember? Thinking you were going to lose your maintenance job because you could not stop arguing with Richard. I was deeply concerned about my employment prospects. She laughed. You were impossible. I was undercover. Those are not mutually exclusive. Gloria, waiting near the doors, called back. If you two are finished congratulating yourselves, some of us have somewhere to be. They followed her outside into the bright morning. At the scholarship ceremony, Gloria's granddaughter crossed the stage to receive recognition for beginning her nursing education. Gloria stood first, applauding with tears in her eyes. Tyler sat several rows behind her, quietly smiling. Marcus watched the moment and understood that real change rarely arrived with dramatic announcements. Sometimes it looked like a worker no longer afraid to report mistreatment. Sometimes it looked like a manager choosing integrity over advancement. Sometimes it was a young employee learning to tell the truth before fear made the decision for him. And sometimes it was simply a woman being treated with dignity before anyone knew whether someone important was watching. Later that afternoon, Marcus and Emily returned to the lobby. A new cleaner was struggling to move a supply cart through a heavy door. Before Marcus could react, a senior executive walking ahead of them stopped, held the door, and waited without knowing the chief executive officer was behind him. Marcus said nothing. He only looked at Emily. She understood immediately. No cameras. No speeches. No reward. Just an ordinary moment of respect. Emily smiled. Maybe it is working. Marcus watched the cleaner pass through the doorway and nodded. Maybe. Then they continued toward the elevators together, leaving behind the place where one act of courage had exposed years of silence and reminded an entire company of a truth no title could improve. Character is revealed most clearly by how people treat those they believe can do nothing for them.